As it stands, I have one last unexplored facet of the sub £20 LEGO Star Wars range, the Microfighter. Despite being cheap, in fact the cheapest, I never picked one of these things up. I had no preconceived ideas or opinions, I just didn't, until now. So I finally picked up a Microfighter, and not a bad looking one at that. I thought for a short time LEGO was attempting to replace them with mechs. It's a pretty similar concept. I will be comparing Microfighters to mechs to see if that reality is an upgrade or not. But as for the focus of today, I'm going to be diving into this untapped world of tiny ships and exclusive minifigures. As always, I will be starting with that minifigure. Not the first Boba Fett I've looked at, mind you. This one is the Book of Boba Fett. Boba Fett. The box also reminds us of this fact. Right out the gate, this one follows the rest with so much detailed printing. Arm printing looks amazing. I am really liking this recent trend of arm printing in LEGO Star Wars. This arm printing in particular looks fantastic. You can see the shoulder armor and his wrist weaponry represented absolutely wonderfully. Moving down to his legs, you can see his knee pads, as well as that Under Armour suit spilling down into the legs. And of course feet printing. Love to see that anywhere. All of this printing is very nice and very detailed, though rewinding just a bit. This one is the Book of Boba Fett. Boba Fett. Yeah. The green is that weird mint green, and the majority of the figure is black, which means it's quite difficult to appreciate the printing. Moving up to the helmet, the visor is quite difficult to make out in particular because the colours on the helmet just lack that contrast. The helmet on the whole is not my favourite. This minifigure on the whole is not my favourite. Out of all the Boba Fetts, this is not up there for me, I'm afraid. I do massively prefer the Mech's Boba Fett minifigure. Though, moving on, Microfighters do seem to have a good selection of minifigures overall. Back in the golden age of Microfighters, we had such examples as this Imperial Crew minifigure, only being available in a Microfighter. It's a cool black printed version. A bit more famously, we have a plain Phase 2 clone, being essentially tied to a Microfighter. That is correct. Your only options for a movie version of the plain Phase 2 clone trooper was this Microfighter or an advent calendar. Moving back to the builds of the Microfighters, just going through the line, the sets themselves seem to have some creativity that I just didn't expect. Sets like Bantha v Skyhopper and Dewback vs Escape Pod really gives me a sense of FOMO and would sound super cool as full-size packs. LEGO? I see you doing those versus packs. Other Microfighters like the gunship and Arc 170 just look like nice versions of the ship. I just want one. Just here in my hand, please. The line in retrospect looked pretty fun, and with rumours for this year, thankfully these seem to be going nowhere. Speaking of builds, that Slave 1. This is a neat little build. I'm just gonna spoil that up top because I am really impressed with how this looks like the full size thing. I understand these aren't necessarily display items, but I feel this Microfighter in particular just nails the representation of the bigger thing, and I will absolutely be having this thing on display, especially with no Boba Fett inside. The build was also a nice experience. I think that brickhead just put a bad taste in my mouth when it comes to small builds. This little guy has some nice chunky pieces and it goes together nicely. Also, for being so small and so cheap, this guy had a nice array of play features. Not something I'm gonna necessarily appreciate, but just seeing it in a build like this did impress me. The fins move and the cannons doubling as flick-fire missiles was also a fun and quite clever addition. This particular Microfighter, after having it in hand, is amazing, and a must-have. But alright, how does this guy compare to those mechs? Firstly, I feel these Microfighters offer better value and a cheaper price. Mando's N1 Starfighter notwithstanding. Why is this so expensive? You get a nice little build plus an amazing minifigure for a better value. An almost identical package to what the mechs are offering. A plus for me is that the build here is a representation of a thing from the source material. To me that makes the largest difference. The mechs are fun and weird, and I'm all about fun and weird, but if there was a Darth Vader's TIE Advanced with that mech's minifigure, it would be no contest. I would just buy so many of those TIE Advanced. So wrapping this whole thing up, the Microfighter line is cool, and I'm disappointed that I didn't give it a look in sooner, and will absolutely be buying more of these in the future. As for this particular one, the build is fantastic, nails the representation and the functionality. The minifigure in this instance wasn't my favourite, but it certainly gets the job done and looks like the one it's supposed to be. But yeah, Microfighters, they're cool, they're fun. Thanks for watching. And also, thank you for 1,000 subscribers.